dignity and understanding and connection are at the heart of good care. Just those small preferences that we kind of take for granted and we don't kind of acknowledge as much can make a significant impact on that patient.
Hello and welcome to the RCHD podcast. This week is Dementia Action Week, and we're talking about a simple but powerful tool that helps us provide more personalised care here at Royal Cornwall Hospital. It's called This Is Me and helps staff understand the person behind the patient, especially for people living with dementia. And in the studio today, I'm joined by Stephanie Wellstead, who's Improvement Practitioner for Falls, Dementia and Delirium. Stephanie, welcome to the studio.
Hello, thank you.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your role here at Royal Cornwall Hospitals?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm an Improvement Practitioner for Falls, Dementia and Delirium. So I help to basically create the improvement plans for the Trust, where we look at improving patient care related to dementia and delirium, but also falls prevention. So a couple of projects that have taken place, for example, is the King's Fund dementia-friendly hospital environments. So wards like Tintagel have recently been refurbished to support a more dementia-friendly environment to hopefully improve patient experience and patient stay whilst in the hospital.
Oh, wow. And for those who might not be familiar, what exactly is dementia?
So dementia is a progressive condition. So there's a magnitude of different varieties of dementia. The most common is Alzheimer's. So it's basically a build-up of plaques and tangles on the brain that can then cause changes in a person's memory or their perception. And it's a lifelong condition, so it's not something that's got a cure at the moment. So obviously from the point of diagnosis, the gold standard care is a palliative care to ensure that patients receive the best care as possible and look for the future of care and preferences around what they would like in the future.
Yeah, and I imagine that unfamiliar environments are quite stressful for people who have dementia. Why can hospital environments be particularly challenging for those people living with dementia?
So hospital environments are very clinical based and they're very, very busy environments. So for people with dementia, where their brain and cognition is already impaired, it can be quite disorientating and quite frightening in some instances as well. So obviously the unfamiliar surrounding in itself, so it's a different layout. The bathroom, things like that are in different locations. There's different staff, different faces that they're not familiar with. But then you also have the sensory overload of all of the bleeping machines, the blood pressure machines, the lighting. And then you've also got the kind of disrupted routine of if patients, for example, need to be transferred to a different ward environment or a different area, but also other patients surrounding that patient bed space as well. And then obviously you've got the communication barriers where patients, if they're not able to communicate their own needs themselves, this is where the This Is Me document comes in really handy to support clinical staff.
Yeah, so tell us about the This Is Me document then. What's it all about? How does it work?
Yeah, so the This Is Me document is a very simple document. It was originally created by the Alzheimer's Society. So it helps to identify a patient's likes and dislikes, their preferences, their life story. So you get to know more about the person rather than just the diagnosis in itself. And it does just make a massive difference in kind of that care that you're able to deliver for that patient, but also it provides that partnership with patients, loved ones and carers where they're able to tell that patient's story if they're not able to communicate that themselves anymore. But most importantly, it's providing that holistic care for that individual and getting to know them beyond their diagnosis.
Yeah, so what sort of information is included in the document then? What do you get? What questions are asked and what do you fill out?
Yep, so it could be anything. So their likes and dislikes, whether that's food, music, anything that can kind of engage interaction and care and support. There's also things around their family, if there's anyone that's important to them. So if they've got a husband or somebody that's recently passed, it makes staff aware of those kind of sensitive topics as well. Personal hygiene and kind of their mobility, how they would normally mobilise or how would they meet their own needs, the sort of things that they would be interested in whilst at home, if they've got any spiritual needs, whether they go to church every Sunday or they generally just have a big interest in something in particular.
Yeah, and I noticed as well that one of the questions in there is like favourite places that I've visited, and I guess that's just to help staff make conversation with the patients, as well as things like things that you worry about or upset you as well. So I guess they're quite important questions to have for staff.
Yeah, definitely. And when you think about patients that come into hospital, as we said at the start, with the different environments, different people, they don't have that same level of reassurance or home comforts that they would being at home. So knowing what might trigger a patient or might upset them, whether they've got any kind of past trauma in their life, or like you said, previous locations that they've loved, their holidays, or which is a really special memory for that person. And it can help really settle a patient if you're to kind of bring that up in a topic and something that they remember because it's their long-term memory.
Yeah.
And then have that meaningful conversation and spark again. And that's just a really kind of personal touch as well, to have that conversation and communication with the patient.
Yeah. Who would normally fill this form in?
So anyone can fill it out. Obviously, the main purpose is to involve the person living with dementia as much as possible. But mostly it is carers or loved ones or somebody that knows the person best. So they can provide as much detail as they can as possible to ensure that that's kind of communicated to the people that don't necessarily know that person very well.
Absolutely. And from your experience, how has it helped you or colleagues across the hospitals with providing more personalised care?
Yeah, so I think it's had a massive impact from kind of my personal and professional experience. So simple things as how a patient likes their cup of tea. So instead of it being just they like a cup of tea, it's knowing how they like it. Is it strong? Do they have 2 sugars? Do they like it in a cup or a beaker? Just those small preferences that we kind of take for granted and we don't kind of acknowledge as much can make a significant impact on that patient. But also it helps you to understand, again, the person behind that diagnosis. So the dementia diagnosis doesn't define that person. So you will meet people from all walks of life where I don't know, my grandma, for instance, she was an aircraft mechanic in the Navy. But by looking at her, you would never assume that's something that she did as her job.
Yeah.
But it's seeing beyond that diagnosis. And then you're able to, again, provide that personalised care and meet that patient's needs in a way that you've learnt from reading the This Is Me document and liaising with family and loved ones and the patient themselves.
Yeah, so it's often kind of the small details that really matter the most in this document, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, it's that thing where we kind of take for granted that we know how we like our cup of tea, or if somebody's always showered in the evening, but now when they come into hospital, we're trying to get them to have a wash every morning. That's a big difference and change in routine to what they would normally do in their home life.
What would you say to families or carers who might be unsure about filling one of these forms in?
I would say complete it out as early as possible, because that's the easiest way in terms of avoiding any crises or going into hospital admission and then trying to gather that information and fill it out in a distressing situation. So as early on as possible is best. You can involve the patient as much as possible. If they're able to complete it themselves, it's a nice little task for them to do themselves. And if they are unsure, they can contact somebody like the Admiral nurses who are able to support them, or Age UK, or anyone within the hospital. If they're unsure, there's contacts that can support them if they need that extra support. That's
brilliant. And finally, what key message would you like to share this week for people to take away for Dementia Action Week?
So, firstly, dementia is not just the memory loss, it's that changes in perception and their emotional well-being, and it's wider than just the kind of forgetfulness. And I think it's really important that we do kind of raise awareness of dementia and kind of get rid of that stigma around it and help to identify patients as the people that they are before they've had that diagnosis. And anyone can make a difference, as long as they kind of make awareness of that person, their likes, their dislikes, their preferences, their life story, and communicate that between hospital or care home or when they get discharged home, and making sure the people involved in their care is aware of those kind of preferences. That can make a massive impact. But most importantly, This Is Me as a tool to empower staff to deliver that personalised care and provide that dignity to the person living with dementia. And then lastly, it would be just a reminder that the dignity and understanding and connection are at the heart of good care. And when we understand the person beyond the diagnosis, that's when it becomes really more personalised.
Absolutely. Stephanie, it's been a pleasure to have you back in the studio again to talk to us. Thank you so much. And I hope everything goes well for this week.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to find out more about This Is Me, there is a link to it on the news pages of the Royal Cornwall Hospitals website, and I'll put a link to it in the description as well. That's it from us for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll speak to you next time.